Okay, it is 5:30. I'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to start by acknowledging that this meeting is respectfully held on the traditional territory of the Sycos First Nation, on whose land we live, work, and play. We have an agenda circulated. Would somebody like to move? Option? Seconder? All in favor? That's carried. We have the minutes from the March 30th meeting. Somebody like to move adoption? Seconder? All in favor? That's carried. No bylaws, so we'll go straight to delegations. I'll hand it over to you, Andrew.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Very efficient tonight. All right, let me just share my screen quickly. So look, thank you as always, just as I'm getting that moving, for the opportunity to speak. I think it's a perfect time, as we are moving through the end of the winter. We've quantified snowpack accumulated, real-time situations in the reservoir, and now looking forward to the freshet over the next couple of weeks. So I think it's a perfect time to update the district and update the community. All right. Just confirming you guys can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right, let me move on. All right, so if we look at sort of precipitation over the winter, so that's the period that we consider from November through to end of March, effectively significant inflows, so 250% of long-term average inflows across that winter period. And you'll see on the reservoir elevation in a moment that we continued to see the water level increase across the winter. Which has only happened once before. There's a similar hydrograph back in 2015, and I'll show you that in a moment as we look at it. As well, a significant change from November into December, where we saw precipitation significantly above long-term average. It did ease off over that January period, and it was exceptionally dry over January, only 87%. But then February sort of tracking along that long-term average mark. And then the real interesting one was March. So 233% long-term average in precipitation, the majority of that in snowpack, and the majority of that being held on the western side of the watershed. And I'll share that in a moment. We looked at total historical precipitation in March on the historic record, and basically this is one of those charts I've shown a number of times. Each of the years on record here down below, the driest March on record, 1991, all the way through to our new wettest March on record, 2026. So very interesting to see, and that resulted in significantly above average snowpack, and I'll show that on the next slide. It is interesting to see this chart shows sort of the graphic representation of the watershed, the Nechaco here. Anything that is in that sort of blue color through to the darker green is below long-term average. So you can see the majority of the east side is actually considerably below long-term average, whereas the west side, that real coastal mountain area, in particular around Tatsa and Pondozi, is significantly above long-term average. So that's where the majority of that snowpack is being held at the moment. So looking at that snowpack, as you can see, again, across that December period, as I said, there was that big sort of spike. We flattened out over January and even February, sort of March, we were right back into that long-term average perspective as far as the snowpack goes. And then, the beginning of March, right back at long-term average. And then across March, that significant rise up. And you can see that all the way across. And interestingly, that direct bump that happened on April, that's as a result of the manual snowpack surveys that Avison conduct for us. So we actually identified there were some unusual ice layers in the snowpack that resulted in more snow water equivalent than our automated stations were showing. So that's that correction there. You see a slight trend down since then across. but the majority of that is being at the low elevation. Up in the higher elevations, up in the majority of that western side of the reservoir, temperatures are still consistently below zero. We haven't seen the onset of freshet yet. Just each of the individual stations, you can see Tatsa Lake and Pondosi significantly above long-term average wells as well. And then even Lou Lake, this is the one that we use on the eastern side of the watershed. The higher elevations on that east side even have slightly above long-term average as well. So a very interesting year as far as snowpack goes. And one that has, yielded us some very interesting numbers as we look forward to 2026. So it's been a wild ride across the March period. Precipitation forecast. Looking across the next 10 days, we're continuing to see sort of a dry forecast across the period. And the 45-day sort of look forward also shows us what we would expect to be. Oh, actually, I'll show you that in the next slide. But look, we don't see anything significant in the next 10 days, significantly dry. And then the 45-day precipitation average is expected to be below average, and temperature projected to fluctuate a little bit below and above normal. So, we're not seeing any clear trend in temperature, but we are getting some strong triggers as far as precipitation over the coming 45 days looks. All right. Reservoir elevation. This is probably the most interesting chart that we see at the moment. These spaghetti charts I love. Some people really don't. The way to read this is the reservoir elevation. A full reservoir is what we call 2,800 feet up here. An empty reservoir is 2,785 down here at the bottom. Long-term average reservoir elevation is this dotted black line that basically threads right through the middle of the curve. And then you can start to follow the 2026 curve here in solid red. And it might be worth just looking at the 2025 curve as well. So 2025 through this time last year, you're all aware, significantly below long-term average. At the end of the spring freshet, we were in a very concerning position, being nearly 5 feet below long-term average. And then that trend continued all the way through to November, where we were the second lowest on record. You can see here. And the only other one in comparison was the deliberate emptying of the reservoir in 1961. So back in November, December, we still weren't optimistic. We were still concerned about reservoir levels. And then over December, we saw precipitation in the form of rain. We saw warmer than average temperatures, and that reservoir just continued to go up. And so all of the precipitation that was falling in that east side was effectively melting within the winter year. So we saw that trend continue to go up. And the only other sort of trend that looks similar to that is this blue curve that runs through the middle here. And that's the 2015 curve that runs right there through the middle. So it's interesting to see that has been replicated, but 11 years ago in the past. And a lot of that was held over the spring as well. By now, there were already significantly above average inflows and rain on snow events that were happening in that 2015 year. And certainly we don't have any indication of that this year. The spring freshet volume forecast. So this is where we take all of the reservoir conditions that we currently see. We take into account the weather forecast. We take into account that distribution of snow water equivalent. And we basically do a calculation in our model that says how much volume of water can we expect to receive versus the long-term average. The bottom here is all of the years in the historical range represented, with the lowest 2024 on record. 2025 was our second lowest on record. So they're the years that have caused me a number of grey hairs and a number of sleepless nights, all the way through to the wettest years on record, so 2007 over here. Our current average, as we sit here today, is 121% of long-term average. And then what we do is we plot the 80 to 20 percentile range, and this becomes our likeliest range. The other thing we do is we plot the outliers. So the example we have here is if we receive 2007 precipitation today, rain, snow, etc., on today's data, this is what we could reasonably expect to see. So that's the wettest sequence on record, all the way through to the opposite end of the scale, where if we saw 2024's precipitation from today onwards across to the end of August, we could reasonably expect to see somewhere down here below long-term average. So it's interesting to see there's still quite a bit of variability in there, and how precipitation falls in spring is the big driver to that variation. If we see rain on snow events versus, dry sunshine events, that water is evaporated in the sunshine, where versus rain on snow, where it becomes completely liberated. So, and that's one of these biggest drivers in here, as well as how much precipitation falls. All right, flows over the last 30 days look very flat curves over the last month. So starting at Skins Lake Spillway, consistently releasing that 33 cubic meters per second. Chislada Falls, only a very slight uptick, so only very small melt that's been coming into the system. All the way through to the Notley River, again, rather consistent, but it has shown some signs of a kick up. At least some of that lower lying water starting, and that warm period that happened last week, you can see the upticks there in both the Steilacoe and the Notley. At Vanderhoof, at Vanderhoof, still very consistent flows, and you can actually see that's sort of running consistently. We haven't seen that significant uptick yet in the system, so we are working on that, and I'll talk more about the spring releases in a moment. All right, inflows into the reservoir. So this chart, I know there's a lot going on this chart. This is how much water is flowing into the reservoir at any given moment. The way we look at this, the solid gray curve through the middle, that there is the long-term average. The darker gray shading is the 80 to 20 percentile range, and then the light grey is the historic record. So this is on any given day the most amount of precipitation we've seen going in versus the least amount going in on that same calendar day each year. Our forecast this year, actually, so let me go to the actuals. The actuals you can see here are significantly above long-term average, and each of these peaks represents one of these, precipitation and melt events that we saw across the winter, and that's how we saw the reservoir continuing to trend up. Water moving out of the system is this red curve. So anytime the blue curve is above the red curve, the reservoir is going up. Anytime the blue curve is below the red curve, the reservoir is going down. It's worth noting here that back in November and December, we were still importing energy. We were still very concerned about the drought, whereas now we are back to exporting energy, and the smelter is running at full capacity again, and we are exporting energy back to BC Hydro. So we are back to a normal full operation in Kumano as well at the moment. All right, the forecast is the dotted blue curve that we see here. And effectively, given the 45-day forecast that we're seeing a soft run into the spring period, and then we see a relatively calm, following of the long-term average curve. This is all dependent on weather, though. If we have a warm snap in May and we see temperatures significantly above, you could see a spike. Alternatively, if we have a cool May into June, this curve could be displaced in time somewhat. The reservoir projection. So as we sit here today, we're 1.5 feet above long-term average. So that delta from here to here, that cooler forecast you can see has sort of driven that down, as well as generation. We're expecting our long-term average. It's a narrow band in the 80 to 20 percentile range, somewhere right around the 2780, 98 to 2799 feet range. At the moment, we only have one sequence in the historical record that sees us above long-term average, above a full pull. And that's this one that you see here in the Skins Lake Spillway discharge. And I'll get to that in a moment. Discharge into the Nechako Reservoir, discharge through Skins Lake Spillway. We are 95% probable that we are going to be spilling this spring. We're actually quite excited to share, and we'll be sharing with the WEI meeting. We've shared with the technical tables, we've shared with Nechako First Nations that we will be targeting the WEI wet sequence, which is the flow 6A wet, and that will effectively look like this replicated spring freshet here with some kind of runoff towards STMP before STMP picks up. The reality is that could go up, and depending on conditions, that could hold and bridge all the way across. Vice versa, it may be slightly a steeper curve back down, but effectively it's showing us that we will be following this freshet curve that we defined in the WEI process. So that's exciting. It'll be the first time that we've had the opportunity to run that. And this sequence here, we will be managing for. So we will be taking decisions proactively to, mitigate this sequence here, which is that 2007 level precipitation on top of our current conditions. We say here our flood probability is at our normal threshold, which is below 5% probability of flood. We never say 0% because the weather is always a fickle thing. So if we see unprecedented weather events, it isn't something that we're able to foresee. So I guess long story short, looking at this, we are very pleased to say that for the Nechako Reservoir, and as far as hydropower generation is concerned, the drought is over. We can confidently say that. We have been able to return the smelter to full production. We are working with BC Hydro on their energy needs this year and how can we fulfill that in the best possible way. And we're in that rare zone where we have sufficient water for generation and to run the smelter, but we haven't seen an escalation in that baseline flood probability. So we're threading that needle. My reflection as we look at this is it's quite stark to see the shift that we have undergone from where we sat, just 4 to 5 months ago, back in November, historic lows, low precipitation in November, to where we sit today is quite extraordinary. So it's been a remarkable turnaround. All right, so looking at what that means for Vanderhoof, effectively we will see the spring freshet ramp up sometime in mid-April to early May. We are working with the Nechako First Nations and the Water Engagement Initiative technical table on what the natural freshet triggers look like. And effectively, we're looking for a strong freshet uptick in the Nechako in order to provide for that naturalized hydrograph. In the past, that may have happened earlier. There may have been a release of water earlier. But again, following WEI and following the conversations, we now have implemented this naturalized hydrograph in response to the interests that have been brought by those groups. And we expect that to ramp up. And then as we see the weather conditions, we expect that to sort of hold and bump down into the STMP period there. So all said and done, in a very healthy state. And like I said, this one sequence that has us currently going above the flood threshold, we will be managing for proactively. So expect that we'll drive that down over the coming weeks. All right, I've covered a lot of ground. Without sort of pausing for a breath or a drink, but certainly open to any questions, queries, observations, or reflections.
Any questions? I'm not seeing any questions around the table. Thank you so much for the presentation, Andrew. As you say, it's a good position to be in right now, and look forward to having a healthy amount of water in both the reservoir and in the river.
No, it is. It's still a very unusual year, and I think it is worth just reflecting on. I'm not sure, some of you may have seen Dr. Stephen Dairy's comments in the media around, even though there is that significant snowpack up in the watershed, the lower lying agricultural areas are still seeing drought signals and are still significantly below long-term average. So it's this quite bizarre two-speed system. And interestingly, when you look at the provincial water balance, it's showing that I think we're at 91, 92% of long-term average, but a lot of that's accounted for in the Nechako. So a number of the BC hydro systems are significantly below long-term average. So this will be another year where, working hand in glove with hydro to support the province's energy needs and energy independence from the United States will be critical.
Absolutely. Councillor Franco first, and then.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks for the presentation. Always enjoy the information. Of course, I'll probably take a different look at this. I'm looking at, I'd love to get the answer on, say, maybe the last 10 or even 20 years, but can your team go back and look at the freeze-thaw events? So you've had five in the, we've had five in the last 6 months. I'd love to know 20 years ago if that's changed. That seems significant on the freeze-thaw events, and I'd love to know whether we can figure out that it was 1 or 0 20 years ago, and then that's just another thing for climate change, right? That's all. So
yes, look, certainly we'll take that as an action and come back. I'll get the team to pull some trends, etc. My initial reaction is yes, it is a change, and this speaks to the work that UNBC has been doing, where we can reasonably expect these slightly warmer winters. A lot of the time on the coast, we sit right on that freeze-thaw cusp, but we seem to be sitting more on that thaw cusp than that freeze cusp in the last, few years. With climate change, they're expecting more precipitation. And again, depending on the models and, how far forward you look, etc., but it's somewhere between 7 and 10% more precipitation. But that will fall a lot in these extreme rainfall events in the spring and the fall, hotter, drier summers, and then with these freeze-thaw events. So, I think it is worth looking at. Like I said, 2015 and 2026 seem to be quite similar in that, but I'll get them to pull the data both from a temperature perspective, but also from a precipitation and inflow perspective.
Great, thank you. Councillor Young.
Yeah, great to hear that drastic turnaround. Obviously, we were all quite concerned back in prior to November. Just to going back to, you caught my imagination a little bit when you talked about meeting the power needs of the province, and you said that we're getting back to close to the normal numbers that are being pushed back into the grid system. What would the normal numbers be on an average year in the past, and where are we at now? Because right now you're saying we're getting there.
I think, and again, it's not always fair to equate long-term average water levels or precipitation levels with energy availability, etc. There's a whole lot of confounding factors, but I think the province's snowpack is currently at 91% of long-term average. I think most of BC hydro systems are sitting around 95, 96% of long-term average. And I believe at 100% long-term average, it takes care of all of the domestic demand and provides for some energy export to the US. So I think that's sort of the case in point. The only reason I'm hesitating a little bit on my facts is with Site C online now. I'm just trying to remember when I read that article that I'm thinking about in my mind and whether it included Site C or whether it excluded Site C. So again, if that is something of interest to the council, it's certainly something that we can come back to and provide some information on.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? I think it's just one thing I'll point out, when you see those way higher than long-term average snowpacks on the east side, remembering that's where most of the snow is normally too, right? So that's definitely a sounding factor there.
Yeah, and that's why we're seeing a later onset of freshet than we normally would, because normally, you know, the east runs first and then the west follows, whereas a lot of that east is you know, already fairly depleted at this stage.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Andrew. It's been a good presentation to get.
Thank you. No problem at all. And feel free anytime, reach out, always available, and you know how to contact me. Thanks so much.
Thank you. You don't have to leave. Okay, we'll move on to CAO reports. 6.1 is the Chamber of Commerce Centennial Parade route.
So the Chamber of Commerce has submitted an application for the Friday, January 3rd parade. Sorry, July 3rd, not January. Be a little bit overdue. And there's some conditions that we had put as part of that application process, and we've included those in the recommendations for council's consideration.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, next is 6.2, 10 to 12 repairs. And we'll let Nelson speak to that.
Thank you. So tender 12 is our largest water tender here. Of course, it's an aluminum tank that seems to be corroding, and we're looking towards getting it fixed. So Velocity, which was the head company, they've done all their investigations and inspections, and we've had multiple people inspect this truck, and they say that the easiest way to fix this is to sandblast it, weld all the holes up, and then line it. And then it will last another 15, 20 years. It'll probably outlast the use of our truck. So that truck has got about another 10 years just being used as a water tender front line. And then it's got another 10 years after that it can be used as a second line water tender there. So we got about 20 years out of this. So we've contacted a few people. There's multiple ways that we can fix this, but the cheapest, easiest, fastest way is to sandblast it, line it, after welding, and then put it back to use. Our local business here can get that done, and which means that there's no travel time. We can arrange, he will take it, minimum amount of time down, and get it back to us. And so that cost, he's estimated anywhere from $35,000 to $70,000 some. So we've asked for just a cap of $70,000 and to work with a firm quote to get that repaired.
You have a recommendation? Seconder?
Second.
Any questions? Go ahead, Councilor Martins.
Just, oh, I did it.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Just had one question as far as the liner, like, is that a proven fix? Like, has that been done before lots of times, or is that something fairly new? I know I just had somebody ask me the other day that they said, well, they heard they didn't last very long. So I thought I'd better check with somebody that knows.
Thank you. So the liner is a proven fix. There's a lot of vac trucks and stuff, because ours is essentially a vac truck that have a liner. There's 3 different types that you can put in there. One that is not flexible, and that's the one that usually breaks up, fails. So we're looking at the little higher end one with the flexibility, and You can have one that's designed for potable water and one that's designed for other things, and then one that's designed for all. So we're looking for one that's just designed for all, because it seems to be the best coating also.
Yeah, that's all the reason I was asking, because I know I looked at them a little bit the other day too, and there's different levels of them. As long as we're getting the good one, then. Good. Thanks.
Any other questions? All in favor? It's carried. Okay, 6.3, building amendment bylaw 1302. Well,
So there's been multiple updates to the building code since the original building bylaw was put into place. So this amendment will take into account those changes in the building bylaw and bring us up to the current state. So we're looking for approval from council for first, second, and third reading.
somebody like to make that?
I'll move the recommendation.
Second. Any questions? Councilor Franco.
Yeah, I want the opportunity to figure, and Will, you gotta let me know where, if it's this one or the next one. We've got a lot of 33-foot lots in town, and I'm kind of wondering, and we've worked on this, when the old trailer burnt down on Victoria Street. We said, oh, you gotta have a cement foundation. Can staff go back and relook at that and see if we can't encourage some of those 33-foot lots to be built on, not mobile homes, but maybe modular? And I don't think they need cement basements, but I'm kind of wondering if we can't and it won't be in this amendment, but maybe in a future amendment, we can go take a look and see if we can amend that and maybe encourage some housing on those 33-foot lots. I don't know what you guys as the housing group have thought of.
There's a couple new spells that. Look, it came out, I just pointed at it. Okay.
Magic.
Yeah, there's a few communities, I think they're a little more aggressive in that area. Is it Prince George and Kamloops? And I think Chilliwack possibly, but we definitely need to look at some options there, especially in the infill. And so, there's different ways to do it that we came across when we we're on the housing committee, whether or not you use I know there's a different term than spikes, but then other than that, and I think a lot of folks tend to frown on that, but even just looking at a slab or something different. So we can look at using modular. And I think as soon as people hear modular, they hear something different or negative. So there's some education process around that, but definitely another option that I think we haven't really as a community got after too much.
Yeah, so that would be more of an amendment to the zoning bylaw than it would be in regards to the building or the subdivision. But we are always open to anything that is brought forward to us for consideration. We'll have some discussions with them and look at the feasibility of it. And then we'll bring it back before council for consideration. If we do see that there's a number of these that are coming forward, we may make the changes to the zoning bylaw so that we don't have to bring it back on a regular fashion. But until we get some proposals brought forward to us, we kind of have to work with what we're given. So
yeah, I understand. That makes total sense. But I'm wondering sometimes if we make changes first, if it kind of starts momentum.
Yeah,
because I think right now people are working within confined thought process, and I'm just as you said that, it made me think maybe if we're the ones that make the changes, then people react to that. Because I think right now they're in a certain way of thinking. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's what we've been hearing over the years. So.
Okay, well, we can definitely take a look at that and look at some of the other municipalities that have similar situations and see if there's some things that we can pull out of that. There's also been a lot of discussion across the province in regards to housing and different building types and schemes and things like that that we can take a look at, and especially for these narrower lots. We can definitely look at that.
Thanks.
So we'll bring that back as a
We're on push to speak, so we'll just raise hands for this meeting. Go ahead.
I have Willeen in my ear asking if we need a resolution or is it directions? He's right here.
Can we vote on
finish?
what's on the table?
Yeah, and then we'll bring that forward. Yeah.
Anything else on 6.3? All in favor? It's carried. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion then with Councillor Young to look into different options on those narrower lots. If that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? It's carried.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Okay, 6.4 subdivision and development service bylaw 1299.
So this has been brought forward to council for first, second, and third reading. We're just looking for adoption at this point.
Any questions? Councilor Lozay.
Thanks. I just had a question, like I'm sorry I wasn't here at the last meeting, but can you explain it? These are minimum requirements. I'm understanding, right?
Yep.
So what would be the so that's the minimum. What's the process and criteria to raise some of the requirements? Because it says it's up to the approving officer, building. So what
That's-
would,
So what we look at is that when there's a development that's brought forward or there's capital projects that are brought forward, these are the minimum standards that they have to meet. And so in some cases, there's criteria that kind of overlap with each other, and it kind of pushes these beyond the minimum requirements. So we're trying to establish at least a baseline so that we don't fall below those criteria. And this gives the engineers and developers, as they're coming through and doing these works, that they have to meet these minimum requirements.
okay, so, but we reserve the right then to say that actually, we like to step things up and start curb and gutter and that's, because I'm just thinking the whole premise for having curb and gutter and that type of thing is to preserve roads, manage water and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So there's been a little bit of a shift in that the downtown core and the business areas are the areas that would have curb, gutter, and sidewalk. And we've gone away from that on the areas that are out in the outlying areas. For one, to reduce costs on the initial installation, but also the long-term costs. The cost of having curb, gutter, and sidewalk out in locations that are outside of the downtown creates additional costs for us as far as maintenance goes. There's the cost of damaged curbs and gutters. There's the removal of sections of it when there's new development in areas that they have to remove high back curbs and sidewalk panels and to a new standard as they go through there. When you have open ditches, you also have the opportunity for that to be cleaned out and maintained and a lot easier than buried infrastructure. It allows for us to have offset pedestrian pathways that are behind the drainage ditches, which actually provides a higher level of protection than a curb, because now there's actually a depression between the roadway and the walking area. So those are some of the things that we can take into consideration as we go through. Yeah, so.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Do you have, is there anywhere in town where those walking areas are behind the ditches? I'm not aware of any. I'm just curious. Where?
Stuart.
Lamp.
Yeah.
Oh,
And you're starting to see those in other locations, say like in Kelowna and things like that, where they're doing the pathway is separated from the roadway. It gives it more comfort for the pedestrians that they're not right up against traffic.
mhm.
There's other areas where people try to widen a roadway to provide a pedestrian corridor that's right next to the sidewalk. And next to the roadway, and that doesn't provide a lot of comfort
No.
for pedestrians.
No.
I think some of the areas that we have developed already is going to take a little bit longer for us to get that pathway system set up, but it does provide for a different type of walking environment, especially when you're not in the downtown areas.
Go ahead, Councilor Young.
Back to the comfort, I also think just the safety around, you think about our winter conditions and oftentimes where you lose the opportunity for a walking path, you're more on the road, it's slippery is a new word I just invented, slippery. And I think that, that is something in some of those examples you mentioned, it just really helped a lot of folks who had been complaining about our pathways. So I think it's a good thing. One thing I'm concerned about is always, I think it's, we've been affected as we worked on that housing committee, and I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I just hope we're not exceeding some other areas in terms of our requirements, as long as we have a quality document here, but it has not become overly onerous for a northern community such as ourselves. We don't want to like we have, in the last 30, 40 years, we want to make sure there's certain standards, but we don't want to be, I don't believe we want to be the A+ level, where we're actually, on one hand, we're trying to encourage building, and now this could be a document that discourages by, not on purpose, but it could happen, right? So as long as I'm sure you were cognizant as you went through this and know that you can't have anything in the way anymore.
Well, there's always the possibility that if a development comes forward and there is the desire to do something different, we can always look at that and bring that forward to council for consideration. A good example is when we did the seniors property that's being under development right now.
Mhm.
There was a push for there not to be sidewalk through there because there isn't in the block further down Burrard. And I said, well, actually, it is required, and as that develops, it will also have a sidewalk along that section. And we don't have the ability to separate it from the edge of the roadway, but there will be a bike lane or parking area that's close to the sidewalk. So all of those create those additional barriers so that they feel more comfortable along the sidewalk. And like I said, as we continue down that section, that will continue on that same standard all the way through.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any other questions? Call the question, all in favor? That's carried. Good, we have council priorities there as always. We have the RCMP stats. Anybody got any comments there? Yeah. Go ahead, Councilor Lozing.
No, I'm hearing Councillor Vandola mumbling about the same thing. Sorry, that's not good. Not, but under your breath, sorry, that's not very nice. I didn't mean that way. But yeah, the 20, the liquor offenses is quite a bit higher than it was. And I just, sometimes when they, I know the numbers are relatively small, but that's still a significant jump. I'm just wondering why.
They are, and I'll make sure I have a chat
Yeah.
with Staff Sergeant Day about that. Often it's the case that it's increased enforcement rather
That's
than an
perfect.
actual.
Yeah, and that's great if that's what it
increase.
is.
But
Yeah,
I'll double check on that one for sure.
that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Councilor Young.
I was thinking about, earlier when I was looking at this, I was thinking the same thing, but then there's also, you look at total calls for service. So there is a difference there.
Yeah.
And because I was thinking at times we haven't had a full complement. So we didn't always have folks out there being as proactive as maybe they are at different times, just because of the numbers of officers that are available. So, but when you see the calls for service going up, that's fairly significant. So yeah, it's a good conversation to have.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we will move on to the building permits. Anything from that? Yeah, I know.
How many new houses are on here?
Okay. Moving on, we've got the resolution tracker on there now. It's really good to have. It's nice to see that. Anybody have any questions, either from the in progress or complete? Go ahead.
I just had a thought there too. I think what I wanted to ask what is probably in camera.
Okay.
Yep, sorry.
Good. Correspondence.
Would I be able to talk to something from correspondence, please? In our correspondence, we have 76 pages of letters with a viewpoint that may not be shared by all, but I want to remind everybody and on the record, tell people in our community that we operate under a system where church and state are separate. Both play important roles in people's lives. Public institutions, like local governments, serve everyone, regardless of their belief, identity, or background. Separation of church and state doesn't mean religion is excluded. It means government doesn't favor one belief system over another. And public governance must remain neutral and inclusive and grounded in rights. I've listened to the Prime Minister. I've been at an event where the Premier, the Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker of the House, the interim leader of the opposition have talked about the Tumbler Ridge tragedy, not in the way that these letters do, which is despicable and horrible, but on the mental health standpoint. So I want people to know that that's how we govern in Canada, and that's how we govern, or I govern in our community of Vanderhook.
Thank you for sharing that, Brian. You know, it's a really sad day, and it's really sad when people take advantage of a tragedy such as that to promote their own viewpoint, and it really is something that shouldn't be tolerated, and it shouldn't be something that we have to receive as correspondence either. Hate has no place here. Okay, moving on, council items. Councillor Frankel, you're up first.
Yeah, we had budget April 7th, and obviously community forest still seems to be ongoing on April 8th. We've had a few things that we've tried to, that probably don't fall in my blue book, but those are the two things that I have. Thanks.
I think it was March. Oh, shucks. A library board meeting. Since our last meeting, though, I attended a library board meeting. Yeah, that's it. Sorry. Jeez, I'm looking at my silly.
You do a Zoom meeting on the plane or anything? You could do that. Yeah, I attended the budget meeting as well. Something that wasn't a meeting, but I think a few folks were in attendance here in this room. I could be wrong, but I know there's a couple there for sure. It's great to see events, and I just want to throw kudos out to those who did the sale on the weekend up at the auction barn there. I think there was over $500,000 worth of large bulls bought and sold, and it's really good to see that money moving around our community and continuing to do so. I think it was one of their bigger sales for a while for that bull event. So good to see. So I just wanted to say that publicly it's good to see those things are being successful still. Huge part of our community. So that's all for me.
Yeah, thanks. Like Councillor Frankel, attended the community forest expansion conversation with Sycus First Nation. The conversation we're having at that table is we're trying to broaden our relationship between DOV and Sycus. We recognize that they need to work on some territorial land overlaps that could create some issues for us in our expansion efforts. The CFFN said they are working on a spatial harvest plan over the next 2 years. We're eagerly awaiting to receive that. Other than that, it's a slow moving kind of amoeba kind of a process. Just getting the ducks in a row with all the nations, but I think we're making gradual improvements along the way. On Saturday, I was attended as the acting mayor at the Central Interior Science Exhibition at UNBC. Was fortunate enough to provide the CAM for Forestry Award, which I thought was interesting. They said, "Well, you're a forestry guy, you get to do the CAM for one." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever." But they did have, they have 2 levels, kind of an elementary kind of group of students and a secondary group of students. So I provided the award for the level 1 and level 2, as well as I was asked to present the best in exposition. So they had a couple of Prince George kids were on the elementary side one, and as well as on the senior side. As a note, Dr. Khan's children, Lauren, Annika, and Dominique all won numerous awards on the special awards. Really thrilling to see, some Vanderhoof kids do really, really well in that kind of a setup. I mean, the Central Interior Science Exposition is, involves School District 91, School District 57, and School District 93. So it's, really, really great to see how well they did. And I think they seemed like every time they were calling an award, one of the con kids were going up to get their reward. And it was really well done. And I have to say it was right on time. And so it didn't like they kept track of everything. So it was a lot of fun in attending that. And that's it for me.
Like everyone else, I did the budget meeting, also attended a centennial meeting on the 31st of March, and we have another one coming up tomorrow night as that event gets very, very close. I attended the annual general meeting of the Vanderhoof Chamber of Commerce at the new space in town at Bean's Coffee Shop. I got to say, your daughter's done a good job there. You probably had to pack a shelf or two, but it's a nice space. It's a nice space for our town. I love the window overlooking the street. We had a guest speaker, John Gibson, spoke, of course, from FPX Nickel. Same type of numbers that we've heard here. Pretty impressive numbers, with up to 1,000 people employed at one time, 600 regulars, and 900 or 600 in the 3-year period, and then 900 full time after it's completed. So, but it's a ways out to be considered an economic driver at this time. The membership in the chamber is slowly and steadily increasing up to 114 members now. Business Excellence Awards held every 2 years now. They were really good this year. And this time around, we had about 80 people, I think, out at the Business Excellence Awards. So it was very, very good. We had our election of officers. Nikki will remain president. Kelly will be Nikki will be president for a 2-year term. Kelly's the secretary. We had people elected to 2-year terms, lots of new faces coming in, and I'm looking for a really positive and energetic year coming up from the Vanderhoof Chamber of Commerce. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Same as everyone else been talking about, attended the budget meetings, of course, on the 7th, and then centennial meeting on the 8th. Also was just kind of interesting, did 2 interviews last week with some media stuff regarding our centennial. One was CBC Radio, was another one was CKPG Television. It's a little bit disheartening in the fact that you speak to them for 10 or 15 minutes and it finally goes to air and you might get 10 or 15 seconds, So not nearly everything you want to get across comes across, but it's still out there for sure. So excuse me, that part is good. Also preparing for tomorrow's meeting, so that, important as well. And I just wanted to say on the note, I think I saw it there earlier too, that I happened to see that new rubber-tired excavator in town today, and looks really good. Like, not that I'm the judge, but people notice it. Said, "Oh, what's District of Vanderhoof got a new machine?" I said, "Yeah, they actually did." That kind of stuff. But anyway, it's here and out there and looked really good. So good on you for sure. That's it.
I guess it would help to have a mic on. It's frustrating with the CICAS meeting that I had to leave after half an hour to catch a flight that was then delayed for 5 hours. So, yeah, I had lots of nice words for Air Canada that day. That flight was going down to Kofi. Luckily, it was just the reception that evening that I missed with that. It was a very good convention. Got some face-to-face time with Minister Parmar. Got to catch up with a lot of industry players, with Mina from Camfor, with Sinclair, but even just talking with, Mitch from Comac and how sales are going for them. It's really great to be down there and getting things around. Community Forest Association, others. It's a good conference that we should always have somebody at, even at those further afield ones. Next week, I'm off to Victoria. have meetings confirmed with Walrus Finance, Health, Forests, Minister of State for Local Governments. Have requests in still with jobs and with the Premier. So hopefully I can get those. But so far, all but one of those meetings is in the first day I arrived. So hopefully there's no 5-hour delay, and it's going to be a long day. It's a good, we have a meeting the night before, so I'm here. But it's good. I'm down there for a municipal finance conference. I'm there as the delegate to their AGM. So good to take advantage of that and get some meetings in while we're there. And the flight's already paid for. Okay. Yes.
While you're talking to the ministers, do you think you can talk any of them into coming here for our,
So far, we've got lots of rejections.
they all seem to be pre-booked or something. I don't know what's up.
Minister Palmer is only worried about the wildfire season. So as long as we don't have an early season, we're good to go with him.
Because the closest to a yes we got was the Premier.
Yeah.
So if he comes, that would make up.
I did suggest to Ravi that they need to work on coming up with distinct excuses. Exactly.
Yeah, he should headquarters.
Yeah. I will keep the pressure up. Awesome. And with that, we're adjourned.